Hi, third graders. Today we are going to be learning as readers about identifying the main idea when we are reading. Now, remember, when we talk about finding the main idea, you can talk about this in a lot of different ways. You could say, why did the author write this passage? What lesson am I supposed to learn from what I'm reading? Or what is this text mostly about? All of those are talking about a main idea. But remember, the main idea is a sentence or an idea, not just one word. It's different than a topic. So to review that, I've made a little list about our friend the frog here. If I was just going to say what the topic of what I'm reading about, I might say I read about frogs. But if I want to talk about a main idea, I would have to have a full sentence or a complete thought about that. So I might say something like, frogs have many interesting traits about them. That might be what I was reading about. Or if I was reading about the food that frogs eat, the topic would be their food. But the main idea would be frogs eat many different types of food. And then I could give some details about that. Or one last example, if I was reading about a frog's home, I could just say homes as the topic, but if I wanted to give a main idea, I would say frogs can live in all types of watery locations. Okay, now we can be asked about the main idea with lots of different phrases. So I've listed some here, like what is the main idea of the passage? That's pretty clear that they're talking about main idea. But even if they ask something else, like which is the best title for the passage, you're having to think about what the passage was mainly about, or what is this story mostly about? Okay, there's a whole bunch of different examples of how someone could ask you to tell them the main idea, and not all of them use those exact words, main idea. All right, so let's practice some of these together. What could we read and figure out what the main idea is? So I put on some short passages here, some short cards that we're going to practice on. So here's a fiction example. We're thinking of two questions as we read. What is the main idea of this story? And second, what title would you give this story once you're done reading it? So I'm going to read it to you. Go ahead and read it along with me if you'd like to. And if you need to, at the end, you could pause it and reread it before you answer the questions. Okay? It says, for the first time ever, Mark was competing in a swim meet. That's like a swim race. He had been practicing every day and felt very excited about the race. As the announcer introduced each swimmer, they took their places on the blocks, and Mark thought about how it would feel to win the race. Then, at the sound of the gun, they all dove into the water and swam as fast as they could. During the last part of the race, Mark held his breath, kicked his feet, and moved his arms just as fast as he could. Upon finishing the race, Mark looked at the other lanes and smiled. The race had ended just the way he had envisioned. All right, now if you need to, you can pause the video and you can reread the story before we talk about the answers to those questions. All right, now let's think about what is the main idea of this story. Now, if we were talking about a topic, we might say the story is about Mark or the story is about swimming. But if we need to put it into a full sentence, we need to think, okay, what about Mark or what about swimming is this mostly about? So we might say something like, Mark is swimming in his first race, and he does really well. That could be the main idea of this story. Did you have something similar to that for what you were thinking it was mainly about? I hope so. Now, if I think about that second question, what title would you give this story? Again, I have to think about what it was mainly about. And I might say something like Mark's first swim meet or Mark's first swimming race, something like that, because again, I have to think about what the whole story is about. And if I just say Mark, that doesn't tell me enough. And even if I just say swimming, that doesn't tell me enough. I need a little bit more than that. Okay, are you ready to try a second one? Now we're going to do a nonfiction story about ants. Ooh, I just gave you the topic, but that's not the main idea. We have two questions we're going to think about. What is this text mostly about? And what title would you give this text? All right, let's read it together again. And again, if you need to pause it to reread, you can do that. Ants are amazing insects. They live in communities and they all have special jobs. Some ants care for the young. Other ants are herders who take care of the aphids. And there's a very special group of ants who guard the home and let only the ants that live there enter. Other ants are considered farmers. They work under the ground to carve enormous cities. No matter what their job is, they all work together. All right, pause if you need to. All right, third graders, what is this text mostly about? Don't say ants. That's the topic. Think of a sentence. What about ants was it telling us? I noticed it talked about caring for young and herding and guarding and farmers. Oh, did you think the same thing I thought? I think this text is mostly about the different jobs that ants can have in their hill. What title would you give this text? Again, I'm going to think about that same idea. I can't just call it ants. Maybe I'm going to use that last sentence. Could I say how ants work together? Or how ants use their different jobs together? That's what I'm thinking, but you might have had another great idea. I'm sure you did. Now, you're going to stop this video and you're going to take out your packet that is called Main Idea on the front. It doesn't really have a cover. Sorry about that. And there's a story, and it's going to ask you to do some similar things. It's going to ask you to read the story and then write down what the main idea is, or think of another title for it, or answer questions like that. Please do the first 3 stories. They're all going to be pretty short, kind of like our examples, and then they'll have some questions on them. So it'll be the first 3 stories you get to, all right? And I'll see you back here tomorrow.